Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Language Facilitation Q&A. My name is Marcy Melzer, and I am an intuitive language facilitation consultant. I was a speech therapist for 30 years, and now I work online helping parents all over the world shift your child's communication from nonverbal, limited verbal, needs based language into the ultimate that everybody wants from their kids, unprompted spoken language. That's what we're all hoping for here. And so, welcome if you are joining me today live. You are welcome to put your question in the comment section of this video. Hi, Lisa. Thanks for joining me today and saying hello as well. You're welcome to do that. Even if you're watching on the replay, go ahead and put your question or your comment, please, in the comment section. Like this video and share it with your friends because this is a really, really big topic today that I'm talking about. It is what happens when parents don't agree with your child's therapy plan or treatment plan that is presented with you. This is the time of year. It's March now here in the United States. It is IEP season, which stands for Individual Education Plan. If you're in a school in the United States, the schools are working very hard to create plans. If you haven't already had a meeting or discussion or some note home about what's happening this summer with your child after school is out, the official school year is out, and you probably are also receiving plans for the next school year. So if your child's plan was written maybe even in January, that plan for a child who is older than the preschool age, so kindergarten and age or older, those education plans usually last a whole year. Under kindergarten age, they can revise them at 6 months. But what some parents don't understand is that IEP plan, those are the requirements for changing those plans. And you can request a revision to that plan at any time. They can be revised. Once you set a plan in place, it's not permanent because obviously things change in schools, in kids' lives, in staffing and circumstances. So, for example, if a child becomes very ill at school right in the middle of the school year, a brand new plan can be written. Or if a child does have a significant gain in skills, also a new plan is appropriate because an education plan and a special education plan, which is what we're talking about here, these plans are put in place to provide the documentation that warrants the funding, primarily the funding, and it also is the protection for the parent to ensure that the school or therapist, if it doesn't have to be an education plan, it also can be a therapy plan. In fact, anytime a child's therapy is covered by some sort of reimbursement entity. It doesn't even matter what kind it is, government, private, state funding. It doesn't matter where the funding is coming from, unless it is a benefactor, a private benefactor. There will be some requirements for that funding process to move. And that's where these plans come from. Now, also a therapist or teacher should also have a plan that is guiding the progress. So you understand there are two different reasons that a plan must exist in writing somewhere, because it needs to be in writing for the documentation for the money to flow, but it needs to be created in the first place for the actual reason for the child to be making progress in what they're doing. I know that was sort of a long way to explain all of that, but Now is the time of year for making plans. Now, what I am finding, I left the system a long time ago, and because I was finding myself on the other end of those plans, the one who was creating those plans, and oftentimes the reimbursement requirements for what I had to write down on the paper did not necessarily match the plan that I had for working with the child, because what was on the paper was the requirement for getting paid and what I had to do with the child to see the actual improvement could be more or different even than what I had to write on the paper. So you may have experienced this if you're watching this video and you've had a therapist say, yeah, this is the plan, but I'm really doing something different. A lot of ABA, rogue ABA people, or people who say, I have a different kind of ABA therapist, one who kind of breaks the rules about things. You may see a very different situation and what's going on with the plan that is written down on the paper and the plan that is actually being carried out in your house. And this is really how parents are working around, and professionals are also working around the system. Because the system, parents are using the system because they need someone to pay the therapist, and the therapist needs the system to get paid so that they can help the person. That's how it works in healthcare, and that's why these education plans exist. So, the big question about, if you're watching this video, it's because you don't agree with the plan. And the first tip I have for you is, with the most important plan that you need to care about is the plan of action, the actual plan of activity, what is physically going on with your child every day. Because even in the public school system, what's written down on the paper isn't necessarily what is happening in the classroom. The only way to really know that is to be very involved in the intervention that's going on with your child. There's no other way to know for sure, because I'm here telling you, to everyone on YouTube who wants to listen, that it's not happening that way in real life. And I know it's not happening that way in real life because even after I have left being a speech therapist now, 3-4 years ago in 2016, I left that job. And even now, today, I talk to people who are frustrated because they are being presented with plans that are different than they talked about in their meeting or that even they agree with. So there's one reason is, if you have a therapist that is, jamming and helping your client, your child, you're probably not watching this video. What you're watching this video is if that actual treatment plan you're not agreeing with. And this is where you have a big decision to make. And the first decision is that person going to change and adapt to help you get what you want and need from the therapy, or do you need to find an alternative? That's what every parent faces the decision right now. If you don't agree with what's going on, then you have a choice. You either have to figure out how to help your child do well because that person talked you into whatever it is better than what you think is better. Because if you don't agree and you think something is better and you want the situation to change, you either have to understand how to help this situation continue and improve in itself, because it's not going to improve without you, or you have to decide if you want to abandon it and start things all on your own. And that's how it goes. You have to first come to that decision first. So sorry if I've lost a bunch of viewers about all this, but it was really important for me to have a little rant today here on YouTube and share about why, what happens that causes parents to make these decisions and what you can do, because parents often feel like you don't have a choice. If what they're doing and they're telling you over and over again that what they're doing is right because they went to school or they, for whatever reason, and you don't agree. The point is you don't agree. So what I did about making some notes is kind of a process to move through, to help you move through this process of making a decision. Do I stay or do I go? And if I go, what do I do? Is that sort of where we're finally getting to with the content of this video. So thanks so much for bearing with me to endure this intro part, because it's a big deal for a whole system to be guiding parents to do things that they don't agree with just because it's the system. And I just want parents to understand that you do have an alternative. And here's how I would go about it if I were in that situation, having already been on the other side of that table. All right. So the first thing is, if you don't like the school plan, you have to gather a bunch of information before you have any kind of communication about changing it. You need to understand what the plan is, and you need to understand what the goals are. And you also need to very clearly identify, write it out even for yourself if you need um, to write out specifically what are you bothered by and why. What is it that bothers you about the idea of this plan? If the progress is too slow, if the goals are too low or too high, if somehow your child is not respected, if you don't feel like it's enough intervention, what you need to do is very clearly, because this plan exists because some people went to work to put it together. Like I said, it's a whole big time of year to be creating these plans. And even if your child is brand new with a therapist, he is creating that plan to guide your child's intervention. Like I said, that action plan is the plan that you care the most about. What are you going to do with my child to see the improvement that you're telling me or that we've talked about that you want from the situation? So that is what you need to very clearly identify. What are they doing that's going to get you towards the progress? And if you don't understand why that is, that's what's bothering you. I don't see how what you're doing in the plan that you have outlined for me is getting me to my goal. And before you can even disagree or agree, you have to come to that understanding. So don't jump to any conclusions about whether they decided to decrease time with your child. If you're focused on time, that's not what's important. It is the plan to get you to the goal that you want. So you need to be very clear about what you want out of this therapy, what you're hoping for, with realistic expectations that should be clearly explained. And if you have questions about expectations, this is the time. Even if your plan is 6 months old or 2 weeks old, or you just had your meeting last week, ask them to meet again if you don't completely understand everything that they are going to do. You're going to sit in my room with my child, like not just we will help him learn to answer questions. No, how does that happen? Are they using flashcards? Are they sitting in a room with your child by themselves? Is there a group of kids there? Is it happening in the child's classroom, or is it happening in, are they pulled out? Where is the therapy going on? Are they meeting in a hallway or a bathroom, or are they on the playground with your child? You want to know. They're not going to tell you everything about every session, but you want to know in that plan, how does it happen? If at all possible in a private clinic, you need to be watching so that you see for yourself, how does it happen? At a school, the therapist can tell you, yep, I meet with kids every Thursday morning at 10 a.m. She's on my schedule. I meet with her and 3 other kids. We sit and play a game, or we talk about flashcards, or we do something. And you can ask, what opportunities my daughter have to talk? What chance does she have? This is the meeting time that you need to understand everything completely. When you understand everything completely, and the therapist has explained to you what they are doing with their child, first of all, if they are unwilling, that this is the next step. So now you've gotten all your information gathered together, and you're going to have a meeting with these people to talk to them about what your concerns are very specifically. And when you come with these specific concerns, that allows the school to use the resources they have in their bags of tricks to address each one of your concerns. And hopefully that's the end of it. You're all on the same page. You're doing the same things. You've communicated your concerns. They've communicated their position, and you understand, and you're working together. But just because the plan's done doesn't mean that you stop being involved. That continued contact and connection and all of that must be necessary to move forward. So that's the first trick. If you don't agree with your child's plan, do your homework. Present your information. They're coming to you with data. You've got to come to them with data. Record your child on video if you think they're doing things that they're not doing at school. Come with all your information prepared so that they can compare. They can use their bag of tricks. All right. So if it all goes smooth and everybody works with everybody, that's a win-win. Your child's getting better. Everybody's knows that you care about your child's case. They know that you're on the situation, that you're watching, that you're communicating. You tell them you will be communicating. There's other videos on my YouTube channel to talk about how to get more about that. But then here's the next thing that you need to understand. In a lot of cases, and this is what I'm hearing now, and this is what I also experienced when I was sitting on the other side of the table, there are a whole population of professionals who do not typically like to respond to a parent's concerns. They are more focused on the system and helping the child accommodate in the system. How does your child fit? Where do they fit? What is the right placement? What are the right services to be able to help your child be successful at the school? That's the only job of a school plan. And for a speech therapist, their treatment plan will focus on a specific goal that was identified as an area of deficit in their testing. So if your speech therapist tested for vocabulary and your child's vocabulary is low, they will have a vocabulary goal to increase your child's vocabulary. If it is a reason to communicate, so let's say it is requesting, your child is not requesting anything, or let's say your child is not using any words at all, and your child's speech therapist, every speech therapy assessment tool only assesses spoken language output, especially after a child gets to be 2 years old. Those pointing gestures, those kinds of things, kids hardly even get credit for, because all late talkers, kids who are late in developing their language, will use nonverbal communication. So it's very young kids. If they're not doing that, then they're really impaired. So that's how they attest the expressive communication of very young kids. But after 2 years old or so, they have to be saying some words in order for them to even register on the scale of being, a language user. They have to be saying some words in addition to identifying pictures, like touching a picture when someone says it. They have to be at that level. And so the therapist will be creating the skills the activities to develop the skills that your child's lacking in those areas. That's how they have to do it. So the goals will have to be also measurable, because that's where the data comes from for therapy. So they have to be doing something that is able to collect data. So they're going to identify the problem with a test with a specific skill that's lacking. Then they will create a goal surrounding that skill. So child's not asking for things. They'll say child will start to ask for things 80% of the time when presented with a choice of two objects, will point or say, I want so and so. It has to be very measurable so that they can present the same offer, prompt, opportunity to the child repeatedly and tick off boxes. Oh, today he was able to do it 5 out of 10 times. Next week, he'll be able to do it 8 out of 10 times. And that's how they judge progress, because it's about a skill. So understanding that this is where your speech therapist is coming from. And I explained all that because I know it's hard as a parent to understand what is going on to, cause these treatment plans to be so focused on skills, is because that's where they started, and the therapist sees progress by getting more individual skills. Their income is judged by this progress. If they don't show progress, they don't see income, and they have to measure it with these data. And at home, they don't care so much about what's going on there. Now, an early intervention therapist will probably be working with you in their home, and they don't have to necessarily collect so much of that data. They just rely on those tests to show improvement after 6 months, because in early intervention, therapists don't necessarily collect every data every time. Many do, but not all do, because it's not necessarily required. Like those tick box data, because they document progress using standardized testing in early intervention. So your child just has to do better on the test, but they also get older. So if they get older and there's a gap between, they have to be really bad on the test in order to qualify for services. And so as your child gets older, that gap needs to narrow. And then if it does, then they're not qualifying for services anymore, because that means that they're catching up. That's what early intervention is for, is to catch kids up so that they don't need future therapy. But what is happening, and this is why many parents are starting to not agree with the process, is because on the back end, what's happening on the other side of the table is those funding resources, the changes are happening, and they're saying, well, the money drops really only if a kid has an autism label. So if they have an autism label, then we know it's a good return on our investment to do therapy with a child, because we're training them very early with ABA therapy, not natural therapy, to go towards even the standardized testing that they were using for language, because they're looking at behaviors. They're not even really looking, because they're all language delayed, right? They're all showing poor on the language testing, but they're also saying, wait a minute, in addition to these late talking, now that we're looking at behaviors with a behavior rating scale, now when we match those behaviors with the late talking, the child presents as someone who has autism. And the traditional speech therapy and stuff that they used to just pay for because the child was late talking, they don't even pay for that anymore unless the child also gets this autism label. So that test, that whole variance and difference and stuff, because if a child gains any skills and they learn from their parents, wait a minute, no, they're not showing as much of a delay in the language because they're starting to use some communication, and parents want them to look more severe. So they say, wait a minute, he also does flap his hands, but a lot of late talkers flap their hands. He is walking on his toes. He does line things up. And even if he doesn't do that all the time, but he did it once or twice, that evaluator who is looking for that autism diagnosis is going to go ahead and label a child with autism so that they can continue to provide that therapy. Like I said, it might be that rigid, hard, structured stuff, or it might be we still do what we want to do because that's what I did before the system forced me out, right? I'm going to have a little drink. So thank you for sharing, Ramya. Sorry. Hopefully that hopefully we're getting on straight again. Excuse me. Sorry for the extra whatever. Just a lot to talk about today on this topic. So the idea then is the therapist is focused on getting the kids in this behavior training because it's easy to see progress with behavior. You can teach a little kid to sit and focus, if they're going to label a child with autism so that they can get the therapy. Remember that the therapy that matches the autism label is behavior therapy. ABA is behavior therapy. It's not speech therapy. It's not people who are trained in understanding developmental language. It's people who are trained in exchange-based language. Exchange-based. If you do something, if you say something, I'll do something. If you say something, I'll get something. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about exchange-based language, because that's what ABA is. If you sit and do what you're told to do, then you get rewards. It's all based on reinforcement or reward for doing the right thing. And if you don't do the right thing, you don't get the reward. So it's not necessary, right? It's not necessary for all kids, Ramya, to have that service, because remember, all of these kids are late talking for many different reasons. Ear infections are the number one reason for late talking. It's not autism. In 30 years of speech therapy, for 30 years, we didn't label children with autism until the past 20. It started in the late 90s when label children with autism until the past 20. It started in the late 90s when into early intervention, and then it changed to autism. So everybody in the US knows that if you have an autism diagnosis, that's when the services become available. And providers will tell you, and it's not because those therapists can't do therapy with your child. It's because nobody will pay them to work with your child unless your child has an autism label. So they'll say, you can come and I'll help you with your child, but you have to pay me privately. If you want to use your insurance, then we have to get the autism label. And that's what happened to me as a provider in the system. That's exactly what happened to me. I received specific training for identification and was presented with a contract that said every child who has both late talking and one other characteristic would need to be referred for autism screening, where they would be funneled into a pre-ABA kind of consistent program that was getting them ready for the school district autism program, the preschool program, which was more structured ABA with all one-on-one time, and then which moved them into a special education preschool. It never decreased. So from less than 3 years old, they wanted me to pigeonhole kids with autism diagnosis. And that's why I quit doing it, because the treatment plan for those kids, as soon as they got that, I didn't even label them. I was identifying them to refer for someone to label them, because I wasn't given that. I mean, I never would label a child with autism based on behaviors. That's not my deal. When I was a therapist, I identified what was wrong with the communication situation and facilitated developmental language. I didn't use exchange-based language teaching for young children because they learn it too quickly. they can learn behaviors and they can learn to point or gesture or sign in one session. I could teach a child how to use the sign for more. One session. And it looked like miracle working, right? Because they were already using a lot of nonverbal communication. I just showed them that instead of pulling their mom, they could do this instead. And they learned it really fast. And that's why therapists use that. And then it moved into pictures, and I had to go to training when I worked at the school district in Clark County, Nevada. I had to go to the training to learn how to be a speech therapist to use PECs. This is what we do now. Now we have data that shows that this is how we teach kids to talk. And so I went to the training, and then it was ABA, and they were paying for kids. People were filing lawsuits to get ABA paid for their children because it was this new thing that was getting kids to do things really fast that the old kind of therapy wasn't getting them to do. But there's no difference. Even the therapists were still trying to get kids to imitate and say words and label pictures and do all of that stuff to get them to imitate, because remember, they were just trying to match those skills that they were testing on the therapy. They still weren't considering what was happening in a household with a child using nonverbal communication. As long as in the therapy session it looks better, that's what their plan is. So if you talk to the people at school and they care about your child's development, at that school, at that therapy, they will change their treatment plan to adapt to your child. But if they care about the reimbursement, where they have to follow the rules, because you don't just get to say a child's autistic and do whatever. You have to provide data that shows that they're being seen only one-on-one. They're seen very intensively, that the imitation, that the presentation is repetitive, that the presentation is increasingly difficult because it has to follow the science, the big old book of whatever they learn as BCBAs to develop all of this stuff, right? So this is what it is. Is it useful? Ramya says, is it useful to create such behavior for kids? Ramya, it's useful because that behavior of signing or requesting or handing a picture is replacing a child screaming, standing, crying, parents guessing, right? All of that. Right. So the thing is, all of that kind of prompting your child to say words when they do it, it stops the big behavior of whatever, because it programs a child through. When you want something, you ask like this. When you need this thing, you do this behavior, because they see a child needing something. They intuitively know the child is hungry when they're in the kitchen climbing on the cabinets. Right? And instead of teaching them how to use language appropriate with language facilitation, which is what I teach parents, they stop the situation and they teach the child right there. With ABA, they would say, you are reaching, you want this, say this, and I'll give it to you. And then you won't have to climb on the cabinet anymore. And the child says, okay, great. Well, and then the first time the parent is busy in the other room and they still have the cookies on the top shelf, the child is still going to climb to go and do that, because it's easier, because the parent's not accessible to go and grab it for them. Because in ABA, you're teaching a child, oh, I'll do it for you if you just ask me. But the child doesn't want you to ask you. They just want to get it now fast. And so it starts to work really great with little kids. But what it does is it teaches children that, oh, well, someone is going to teach me entirely through my entire life. And they're going to get me to every single thing. And so if you're not doing it at home, then the therapists at school, because they're like, oh, well, if we tell him 10 times in a row and give him a cookie every time he sits still, he'll do it. Look, he learned really fast. All you got to do is have a cookie ready. Right? All you got to do is have a bribe, some kind of reinforcement, whatever. So then your effort doesn't go from, oh, wow, he learned the skill really fast. So where's your effort on, do I have enough cookies? Is it the right place? Can I just go and do that? And ultimately, you're helping those people get better results at therapy than you are seeing results, because at home, your child is still communicating by climbing on the cabinet, dragging you around, unless you stop them and say, I'm not going until you say go, mommy. And then they go, okay, go, or they make it do. And then that only lasts for a little while until everybody starts to become annoyed. Because in therapy, that's what they get paid for. So every single day they go and they fight with kids. I'm going to make this kid sit in the chair. I've got the best reinforcer. I spent all my Dollar Tree money buying goo and snacks and things like that so that I can get the kids to do the therapy that I've got to write down on the paper. That's where they spend their effort, just like you at home. What do I have next cookie? What do I have? How do I get this set up in my house? How can I get him to do it like that? It's all about you and the therapist taking the responsibility for getting through life. But none of you are teaching the child how to get through life themselves. So the kids get older and older and older, and they're learning. Many of them are not even autistic. They just got labeled with autism, remember, because they had a lot of ear infections and they were late talking back when they were 2. And they got labeled with autism and they got put into therapy and they pushed right up through the whole process. And now they're 7 and they've moved all the way up through the process. And now they know how to say, I want so-and-so. First, they started saying a word after they handed pictures. Then they started, moving into, want so-and-so or do so-and-so or my so-and-so or you so-and-so or I want this. They might have gotten there. And they also might have learned to answer questions with rote answers like, what is this? What color is it? Where is it going? Because these are all skills you can teach a child. The answer to 2 + 2 is 4. You can memorize that. So every time somebody says, what is 2 + 2? If you've memorized that, you know what the answer is. But that doesn't mean that you know math. It just means that you know the answer to that question. So if your child's language is all just answers to questions that they have memorized, then when they have their own ideas, they don't know what to use except for those words that they have memorized. They know when they say those memorized words, they can make things happen. They can get people to give them stuff or do stuff or leave them alone. And if they aren't the right words because they're just memorized bits that other people have taught them, maybe they even learned them from their videos or music or something like that. That's the thing. When you get that to that point and your kid learns a whole bunch of vocabulary, especially they get to be 5, 6, 7 years old, they've been listening to you give them these directions and guide them through life for all these years. They know a ton, but nobody has taught them how to wait, I have an idea in my own head and I feel a certain way in my own head. How can I learn that? And so what they do is they just give up and they go back to using the same kind of nonverbal communication that they used to use. But if you don't understand the words combined with the combination of behaviors, or maybe their behaviors, like if they're super upset and they're 6 years old and they're banging walls and smearing poo and dumping stuff out and all that kind of stuff. That's what happens to these kids because they don't have language to say, I am so fed up and tired of doing the same thing over and over again for year after year. All I do at school. One mom, I just did an interview with her on my podcast. You can listen to it. She takes her 7-year-old child to school and all they do is color. They used to do academics, but she resisted the academics. So they quit the academics and all they do is make her color so that they can get through the day without her having a meltdown. Because that's all she was able to do. She has completely resisted learning from a memorization, do what I say. She just prompt defiant. She's become defiant and now they can't teach her anything. And her mom, because she's being nice and she's working with her and having fun and doing little things and not making any kind of pressure, she's teaching her more than her daughter is learning at school. And that's what prompted me to make this video today, because I know there are hundreds and thousands of parents out there who are being drugged through these action plans that are based on the written plans that they need to do to get the data, to get the money to pay for their salary, to pay for the therapy that they're giving you, right? Somebody's got to pay for this free therapy you get from the state. Who pays the therapist? The government. And the government has requirements. The insurance company has requirements. They don't want to give up money. The government doesn't want to pay out money. That's the other reason I left being a therapist. I would have to wait to get that money from the government, sometimes up to a whole year. And it was pittance, very little by the time it got to me because all those agencies in the middle took a cut. So by the time it actually got to the person who's actually helping your child, they're so busy, they've got to have 50, 60, 70 kids on their caseload if they're in a public school, with these kids who have massive needs, a whole big variety of them, and they're writing these long plans, and all they have is be able to put your kid into their system, into their structured system, because they're all being labeled with autism. And they're all being put in the same pool in the same class. So that's what's going on. I know I talked for a long time about that. This is a big old long rant. So thanks for joining me, everybody. I just want to tell you, these are the things. This is what I want you to do if you are having trouble, okay? First of all, your decision is big. You have to decide. Do I want to stay on this path that I'm on right now, or do I want to do something different? And if I want to do something different, how do I go about it? Step one, try to work with the people. Get your information, work with them together. If they will work with you, great, win-win. If they won't work with you, you will know immediately. They will give you justification, whatever, because I'm talking about what you identified as wrong with your plan that you see with your child, because it's different for everybody. Not enough time, using picture systems, not doing whatever you don't like about it. You know what isn't sitting right with you. You tell them, this isn't sitting right with me, and why? Because it's based on what you want your little child to be learning right now. Their developmental skills. They're not even communicating yet. You want them to learn these things. Is the school working? If they don't want to work with you and you feel that vibe, it's only going to continue. The only way you will change that situation is by somehow proving to those people that they got it wrong. Okay? That your child is capable of doing other things. So you can continue to leave your child in that school and work super hard with your child to get them successful in that school, because then they will see that your child can improve, right? They'll take credit for it, but your child won't improve. Like I said, we're talking about your child here. We're not talking about the numbers. We're talking about actual improvement in skills. And if you believe that there's something about that school that is valuable enough that your child can learn there, then it's your job to get your kid more successful in that classroom, or find a new classroom. And if your child is under kindergarten age, under 6 years old, my recommendation is find a preschool that you can start with. If you need a full-time place because you're working full-time, find full-time. If you can start with part-time and move to full-time, do that. And then you fill in the rest with your time. And what you do, the criteria of that school, meet those needs that you have. And here's my few favorites. Number 1, classroom size is small, okay? A dozen or less kids in the room with 2 teachers or more. You're gonna need that much, because even in a regular preschool kind of place, private preschool, my favorite are those that are affiliated with churches, because they have funding from their church that isn't some kind, that it funds more things, the values of a church are social, development. Nice. They're going to consider you as a parent where the school is not. The school is considered the system, a church-based, religious-based, something in the community where you know that they are caring about people, right? If they are looking after little children, it's not going to be highly structured. It's not going to be, you don't want the highest program, the most whatever outcome. That's what you're trying to get away from. You want less structured, more functional, natural opportunities for your child. It seems counterintuitive to this autism diagnosis, but remember, you're finding that what you see is not what you like. If you want something different, you have to find something different. Look in the phone book, get on Yelp, wherever you got to go, and find a preschool that has more outdoor time in a day than they do indoor time in a day. That's what you want. Kids who get there, kids who come home dirty, and you go to the secondhand store and you buy the clothes that you send your kids to so that they can come home full of paint and mud, and you get reports because they're eating rocks and grass and stuff. This is the kind of environment that you need for your late talking child to go spend time with, because the teachers in those schools will look after your child's communication. They will intuitively know what your child is interested in. They will follow them. They will help them learn to be social with their peers. They'll learn how to solve fights on the playground. All of those things are what your late talking child needs to have exposure to. So, if you decide to stay with the school, or you are in ABA and you do a lot of that kind of stuff, or your child has a lot of that exposure, you also need to be having that kind of learning and experiences on the side. You can do it in your own house with household jobs, chores, doing the laundry, emptying the dishwasher, taking out the trash, fetching the mail, taking care of the dog. All of those things are your school, your child, your late talking child's school. This is how you will be able to teach them functional language that they need. And you have to swap out prompting to do all of that too. So if your child is in a functional learning school and you are doing language facilitation at home, because that's the other component. If they're not in those therapies and they're not doing all of that rigid, structured stuff, they're going to be in the middle of, wait a minute, people used to prompt me. Now I'm not prompting. How do I learn how to do all of that? You take the swapping the prompting challenge so that you can find out some alternatives. And I see that there's some people joining me. Ramya and Sharon both have been following me for a while and started to do things. So that's it. It's true. Ramya says we do it and the school takes credit. Absolutely they do, because if you get your kids to be more successful in the school, and the school is important for you, but it doesn't matter who takes credit. It doesn't matter who takes credit, Ramya. What matters is your kids getting better. This is what's important. But you also have to be paying attention to what are they learning in the school. If it is what you want to do, because not just you supporting the school, how is the school supporting you? And one of these open, free form kids who are learning how to play on the playground and eat different foods and potty train and even get along with their friends, right? Those teachers who are teaching your kids those skills, that helps you as a parent. That's when your kid's learning something at school that's helping them functional in life. That's why when we go to school, we choose to go to school in college or trade school, or when we take a course online or even work with a coach, we learn as grownups, people who want to learn, and we choose the topics. That's why you're watching this video. You choose the topic that you want to learn about. Little kids don't get to do that, but when they're on the playground, they do. They get to choose. When they're in free form playing in a school with dress up opportunity and the kitchen opportunity and the big vehicles that they get to drive and big blocks they get to build, stuff in that kind of Montessori also offers the same kind of opportunities for kids to explore and learn. And the teachers are trained to facilitate the kids' independent learning, which is the opposite of ABA and even structured speech therapy. Those Teachers are done. They see gain when the child does what the teacher says. The natural learning sees progress when the child does things independently. That's the difference in the gauge of the progress that you're looking for. With language facilitation, when you work with me, we look at your whole life and we find the times that fit, that work with your skills, your child's skills, your ability, your child's superpowers, whatever they're interested in learning and doing. We work with that, and you get the talent, you get the skills, you get the expertise to know how to help your child learn how to do this. But if you give up your power to an IEP, a speech therapist, an ABA, a BCBA, because they say, I've got data, I've got training, I've got history, this isn't how we do it, whatever justification that they have, and you know that you are teaching your child yourself, Ramya, all of you out there, then you are just spinning your wheels, and you are the one who's not allowing this change to happen, because there's no reason you can't do it. Even if you don't work with me, you can find out how to facilitate language. Ramya said it already is, but you have to buy in. You have to be all in. You can't just try a strategy for a couple weeks. You just can't take the swapping the prompting challenge for a week and stop prompting. I just had a mom send me a PM today, Laura. Hi, Laura. I hope you're watching. She has a child with significant multiple physiological issues, and she was told multiple times that her child never would talk. And she started with language facilitation, and she got him doing completely needs-based language. She's like, Marcy, he's doing it all. I just can't get past the needs-based, because it's a developmental language process, and kids get stuck at every level. That's why my program is a lifetime program, and I continue to work with parents ongoing, because it's not done. Language facilitation, I'm still learning vocabulary now. I mean, I'm learning about all these new things that are being identified as far as biomedical reasons that kids are showing autism characteristics, and how parents are filling these, fixing them with these biomedical interventions, but they're all different. You must understand that the physical and the education and the environmental, all of these things are how your child is learning, especially when they're young. We didn't have all that structured stuff. And I think about, how are children learning to talk in war zones? How are children learning to talk where there's no schools, where in China where they can't go to school? How are those parents working with their little kids? They are. How did people work with kids, teaching them to talk who had autism characteristics? How did we do it back in the day before there was PECs? I mean, that didn't come around till the 90s, the late 90s, 2000s, that it got really popular. And I was doing a therapy for 10 years already before that. And I listened to a lot of kids run around screaming in the room, trying to get them to sit down and imitate words, before I realized that that wasn't working at all. How I wasn't even connecting with these kids. And when I started to really bag all those other things, and like I said at the beginning of this video, sort of go rogue and start doing my own thing, that's when I realized, look, what works here is not the structured stuff. Memorizing language doesn't get any farther than my little therapy session. And I used to have kids, and I was doing early intervention, going to people's houses, and I would show up and the kid would run in the other room and they wouldn't even want to work with me. And I would say, don't worry, here's what you do. You work with them on this skill this week. You try this strategy while you're driving in the car, while you're walking the dog, doing something. I would give them something that they do, that they love to do every day. Like, every day we walk to the park. Great. This is what I want you to do tomorrow. X, Y, and Z. Go and walk to the park, do these things, talk with your child. And because they were just modeling language right above their child's level and having a good time, eliminating pressure, I'd come back the next week and they'd say, my kid's talking. Although he never, every time I brought the flashcards out, he would run in the other room. But when I said, come on, let's go for a walk, he was got his shoes on, ready to go. And we talked the whole time, and he got all kind of language. And then when the speech therapist shows up at the house, clams up, won't do anything, runs out of the room. And the speech therapist says, oh, he's more severe than I thought, right? Because they don't see it. And you do. And it happened to me all the time. And the moms would freak out and go, "He's really not." And I'd say, "No, I believe you. I believe you. He just doesn't want to talk to me, which is not important because I'm just this." And it happened because I was working with a lot of migrant families. I live in Florida in the United States, and there's a lot of people who live here who come to this area periodically to harvest. It's a lot agriculture area here. And because I speak Spanish, I went to the homes where there were families who live in the area and speak Spanish, and I would show up speaking Spanish with their little kids and just playing and having fun. And I would tell their moms, "This is what you got to do," just having a good time playing with them. And some moms were really open and interested, but some of these kids, they saw my blonde haired lady walking in. They weren't ever around people who looked like me or sounded like me because my Spanish is not that good. I'm telling you what, it's kind of gringo Spanish. Anyway, so that's it. The kids would never work with me, but they would still make improvements. And they were learning Spanish, of course, because even though we live in the United States, nobody in their environment was ever speaking English. So I took an interpreter with me and I said, "We got to learn how to teach these guys how to speak their home language." So, yep. All right. Well, let me read what we've got going on here. Ramya has been sharing so much. I'm glad that you are seeing, the that there is a difference between that kind of teaching. So let's see. Here in India, they put their hands up in the air once a child is 7 years old, early intervention, and they say, "Oh, that's all. Let's plan vocational or alternative communication." Yeah, and you're lucky that you've got it at 7 years old. Here, they're starting to push it on kids very much younger. Today's the first time I heard your video on ear infection. I guess you meant now I have to work on that, how to identify that and work on that. We have to know that if a child does have ear infections, that their speech will be delayed. It's a rare, unless it's a real intermittent kind of one-time, deal. If there's any kind of chronic ear infections identified, typically a child has a lot more fluid than they do infections. Pediatricians can identify that with what's called a tympanogram, a tympanometer. It's a thing they put in the ear and it puffs a little bit of air, and that tests how the eardrum is moving. It's not an ear test with headphones. It's just a puff of air. And it doesn't test a child's hearing. It tests their eardrum movement. And eardrum movement is what's necessary for our brain, that it interprets the sound waves. Sound waves are physical waves that go inside your ear, and your eardrum moves. And as it moves, there's tiny bones in your ear that tickle hair-like substances in your cochlea, way inside your ear. And that's how our brain understands the sound waves that come in. We also pick it up through our whole head. Our whole bodies resonate, which is why our speech sounds different to ourselves. So anytime there is fluid behind the eardrum, even if it's a little bit, it restricts the movement of that eardrum, and the whole hearing process gets shut down. And it sounds different in different kids, depending on how much fluid, depending on the shape of their head, depending on a lot of different things, how often the fluid comes, how thick the fluid is. But anytime there is fluid, and kids who have a lot of ear, nose, and throat issues, if they have runny nose often and they're young, they probably do have ear fluid, because the tubes that connect our nose and ears when kids are little is shaped in a way that the fluid tends to pool up inside of there. And little kids don't know how to suck it all out like that. That's why they use those bulby things to really suck it out. And it's important that you use those bulby things to suck it out in real little kids, because you kids can't know how to blow their nose, and you've got to get it out of those tubes. You got to get it out of the whole sinuses. It's not just what's right there in their nose. So you do have to use that sucky thing. Kids don't like it very much, but that fluid staying in there, that is not good for hearing at all. And anytime there's hearing that's affected, it also causes pressure in there, because it's kind of like when you're riding in an elevator and you're going up and down and you feel the pressure in your ears. That's what happens from that fluid, and it can cause sensory issues on top of that. Also look very much like autism, because kids bang their heads. They do, depending on how severe, again, if there's pain involved because it's infected, that's the other problem. If it's just fluid and it's just in there, kids aren't going to run a fever. They're not going to know. But if they have a runny nose and they're coughing up a lot of stuff, post-nasal drip, then you can bet that there's probably some fluid going on in there. And I've done a lot of videos on my YouTube channel about ear fluid and autism and ear fluid and late talking. So you can check those out on my YouTube channel. So that's what's really important. So, all right. So Sharon says, I've started your strategy for a week and I'm seeing progress. Yay, Sharon, good for you. She's using words that I used before and I feel that it's working. Thanks, Marcy. Good job, Sharon. And you've enrolled your daughter in another school, which has a good rating on special education and quit ABA. Woohoo! That's Sharon. So she's the one who is on my podcast, everybody. And Sharon I've got to give you a big shout out. Congratulations, because Sharon took a lot of grief from her teachers, from her kids' teachers and therapists. Every time she would say, but I don't think this is working. It's kind of counter. I mean, her daughter knows how to talk independently, asking for things. And they sent home pictures to get her to try to do that talking without, without prompting. So now she used to come to her mom to ask for things, and now she doesn't come to her mom at all. All she does is independently pick up a picture board, put the pictures, say the word, and go do something else. So now she's got a new school and new people. So I'm so glad that that goes. Great job. And Rami says, agreed. So good. You can do it. You can do it. All right. And Moni says, hi, good to hear you again. Hi, thanks for joining me, Moni. We are very complex humans, more complex than computers, that's for sure. Language development and language expression, spoken language, is a very complex cognitive ability that you have to have underlying cognitive abilities in order to be able to do. But what is amazing is that kids have amazing ability to learn spoken language, even multiple spoken languages, when they have the right kind of stimulation. As long as they are in a position that they can hear and they are paying attention and listening and actually processing everything that's being said. So if your child's auditory processing is slow, you have to be talking slow. If they're not used to listening to you because they're annoyed by what you're saying, you have to get more attractive. You as parents must make the adaptations to change your child. Now, I just wanted to talk really quick. I got a question that I saw another mom in another group answer. And I just want to read what she wrote because this sounds like so many parents who follow my page. All right. So she says let's see, I have two autistic kids, age 6 and 5. The 5 is still nonverbal and she is very worried. I've spent 4 years researching on autism, ADHD, sensory processing disorders, thousands of pounds spent on professional assessments and consultancies to help my 2 autistic kids. All genuine and convincing answers to this mom that helped me through my journey came from parents and autistic adults who were really both understanding and helpful. And she's hopeful to find answers, and she posted this in a group. And I sent her a private message to tell her to reach out and join our group, but this is it. So she says, my son is still nonverbal, 5 years old, suffers with SPD, which is sensory processing disorder, as well as autism. I tried ABA and PECS. He did well. Then he refused using PECS, and worse than that, he got confused and didn't like the idea of exchanging. He lost appetite, sleep, had behavioral issues. But for example, he was okay pointing at what he wants and making a try, like asking for ice cream or a cookie. So he's making an ask by pointing. Please let me know, how could I start safely and efficiently using AAC devices? I never use them yet, which is a good thing, because I hope if you're watching this video, you don't go that route, because that's what PECS and ABA do, is they facilitate learning something different. Just like we talked about earlier, in India, a kid gets to be 7 and they throw him on some kind of picture system, right? By the way, here's the other thing. My son has limited imitation skills, right? So maybe limited, maybe he doesn't want to imitate, but he has imitated. And that's the other thing. So now she wants to do, and she tried Makaton. I'm not sure how to say it, Makaton, which is a gesture system. I know it's popular in the UK. It was hard to introduce. And since she's talked about spending pounds, she probably is in the UK. Thanks for your advice and help. So that's a very common scenario that I hear from parents from all over the world. They have done all the things. And even this mom didn't do ABA, but she has been working with her child to teach them things like that. And when you get a child who is 5 years old and really using nonverbal communication, we have to understand, what is the child doing as far as vocalization? So if your child is making any kinds of sounds, he already is using very specific, like he can point exactly to the things that he wants. And he probably also has a brother who has a lot of needs-based language, and he's using his brother to help him. His mom is guessing what he wants. And so the issue here is not that she's selecting the wrong communication system. It's that she's selecting an outside communication system and not teaching him to use the words for the communication he already is doing. Because if he is taking your hand, a lot of this happens, especially with the older kids. They'll even do pantomime to let you know they want to go outside. They'll get your shoes and bring you shoes. They'll do whatever they can non-verbally to communicate exactly what they want to you. And where you need to start right now is using language facilitation, teaching your child the language for all of those gesture-based communications. So if your child touches the cookies, they need to be focused, looking at you while you talk about, you are telling me that you want cookies. You want these cookies. Okay, I will give you these cookies. Hold out your hand. Here are your cookies. If you aren't doing that much language explanation, every time your child tries to get something, take you to something, put your hand on something, point to something, then you are missing the opportunity to teach them the language they need to request that object. If you're just giving it to them, or if you block the process completely and make them do tricks like say cookie, then they're not thinking about integrating that language to use later. They're thinking about answering the question. What do you want? Even though you didn't ask that question. But if you did ask that question, they're supposed to give you the right answer. Cookie, I want cookie, give me cookie, whatever you trained them, whatever you taught them. So that's what happens with those kids. And if you have a child who is in that situation, 4 years old, 5 years old, not talking at all, and using all kinds of nonverbal communication, the recommendation I have for you is today, if you haven't already, go to my website, wavesofcommunication.com. Go over there and watch the free class I have for parents. It will tell you all the criteria necessary, and it will remind you how powerful you are to teach your child how to use natural spoken language, because you can do it. I know you can do it. And we've got already over an hour on this video. Thank you so much for joining me, everybody. I hope this was helpful. I know it was kind of a rant, but this is the thing that I know parents are experiencing, because these are the letters that I'm getting. And if your IEP meeting is coming up, this is the time of year to do all of that. What I'm telling parents is, like this mom who just told me now, if you that I just talked about now, if you have a child who is not learning in their school and you want to get them to the point where they can go to a school, and you are willing to work with your child at home, I can teach you how to get them verbal, spoken, using spoken language, and even take that information back to the school so that they have no choice but to put your child in a regular kindergarten with the kind of assessments that you need. I have the training and background to know how to take a parent to that meeting to get you to the kind of education that you want from your child, no matter what school you want to go to. If you believe that the administration, the fundamental administration of that school will work with you, then you want to be there, great. If not, and you want to homeschool your kid and find someone to watch them during the day while you're working, I can teach you how to do that. I can tell you exactly what to do to get your child to the point where you need them to be. Because once you teach your child to use unprompted spoken language, you can teach them anything. You can teach them anything you want, right? I can't teach you how to teach your kid how to learn algebra, but I can help you get your kid to the point where they can go to school and learn from an algebra tutor. I can. So I hope that you will, consider, if you are looking for options, check me out at wavesofcommunication.com. I can help you. All right, real quick before I get out of here, I always got to talk about my book. If it isn't fun, it isn't fun. Teach your child to talk faster than speech therapy. The whole process is here. The book is available on Amazon in paperback, Kindle, and also on Audible. I also have a new podcast. You can access it anywhere. It's called Language Facilitation Helpline. And there are interviews with Sharon is on there and another mom of a 10-year-old. It doesn't matter how old your child is, you can get them talking. The swapping the prompting challenge is over there too. There are 200 videos here on YouTube that you can see. There is a Get Started with Language Facilitation here. You can do the free class on my website. Tons of resources for you. It's my mission because I know I was on the other side of the table. I know that parents can do this. I know you can teach your child faster than therapy. I wrote it all down in the book because it's my mission. And I know I can help you. So check out my programs. And if you are not in a place where you can financially invest in coaching, then you need to be independent and take this action yourself and get started with these strategies and dig in and use it every day. Every single day, you should have dedicated time where you are focused 100% consciously on language facilitation in your house. It is what's necessary. 90 minutes per day, every day, averaged over the course of a week, is 8 to 10 hours of language facilitation time. If you can't get 90 minutes in one day, you've got to make up the time other times. It's not hard to put that in your everyday life because you facilitate language during your everyday activities. While you're getting dressed, while you're driving in the car, while you're having nighttime snuggle time, while you're exploring your environment, visiting friends, going to birthday parties, you can facilitate language. It's not an external kind of thing that you do. It is your activity and behavior as a language facilitator, the way you talk to your child about the way you go through life. That's how people who speak learn language. And this is why parents are better at this than any professional, because in the middle of the night during a tantrum, while you're suffering through the virus, while whatever you're doing together with your child, you can facilitate language. You don't need to even worry if your therapy or school is canceled because of the virus, because you can learn to teach your child yourself. That's what you need. So that's what I want to share with everybody. If you're afraid about your therapy being shut down because of any kind of, because the illness coming out in the community, don't worry about it. Spend your time while you're at home with your kid. Get them talking faster before you send them back. If your therapy is canceled for 2 or 3 weeks while people don't want to work with you, you could take your child back to that therapy with better spoken language than they came out with and shock your therapist, your child's therapist. You could do it. People are doing it all the time, right? Yet, well, 90 minutes a day and still no outcome means I'm not using the right skill, Ramya. Then it's time for you to invest in coaching to figure out how to do it on your own. I can only present general strategies on these videos because everybody's family is different. So this is what you need to do. If you haven't read the book, you haven't found the blockages. If you're working and talking with your child or trying 90 minutes a day consciously to do something, there's something you're not doing right. There's blockages that are in the way that are stopping your progress. And it's not about doing more. It's about doing the right things the right way. You have to facilitate the right things because your child can get 50 hours a week of ABA therapy, and that's more, and it will do more damage. So it's not about more, it's about doing it right. And if you want to know how to do it right and you haven't been able to learn from my videos, I don't know what else to do but to tell you to sign on and work with me. That's all I have to do. So that's it. I can only tell you what I can tell you, because I will tell you that the people who do sign on and work with me, they make progress fast. They do, because I won't stop until I find the right strategy to give them. And that's what the luxury of working with a coach is, right? If you want to learn on YouTube University and do it, then you have to be independent enough to make things going. So Ramya, you just got started. That's wonderful. Check out my website, check out my thing, schedule a strategy session with me and let me know. People will try and try and try and try and try, but if you don't see improvement in the first week, you better figure out what you're doing wrong, because you waste your time. I don't want you to waste your time either. And that's what's important. I'm doing my best here to give you all the strategies I can. All right. Thanks so much. Rami says she's going to work on it and give me feedback. That sounds great. And if you have been watching my videos, again, please give this video a like, share it with your friends. If you've got someone out there who's got a kid who anytime the next time somebody says, I can't believe what they're doing, or there's no progress, or what they're doing this week in therapy, or I don't even know what they're doing over there, or they complain about sitting in traffic on the way to the video to the therapy. I mean, anytime you're around someone who is not happy with their current situation, you can refer them to this video so they can learn how to change it, because that's what I am here on the planet to help people do. And the only thing holding you up is your current habits, because once you change, you can teach your child. It's not about the professionals will try to tell you it's about your child being more severe, or there's more wrong with them, or the things like that. It's just that they're not getting the right kind of teaching, because when they do, they will learn. And I have done it with hundreds and thousands of families over the years. But when I learned how to do it right, there's no going back. I won't ever go back to speech therapy again, because I can't even get the best outcomes doing that. I can help more people here on YouTube teaching you how to help your kids learn yourself. And that's why I gave up my job and I just work as a consultant now. So thanks again for joining me, everybody. I'll see you all on Thursday for my next live Q&A over on Facebook. Until then, keep watching videos, check out the resources, and buy my book. If it isn't fun, it isn't fun. Remember, that's the most important thing. If it isn't fun, it isn't fun. Why do we want to go through life not having fun? I do. I'm going to get ready to go and have some fun right now, editing some video so that I can bring more to you next time. And I'll talk to you soon. Have a great weekend, everybody. Have a great week. Happy full moon, too.